Task Force 69 assaults George Droid's stronghold.
So, it's George Droid!
Their fate balances on a needlepoint.
On your feet, soldier! We are leaving! The Springfield M1A SOCOM 16. You know, in 2004, Springfield basically had the question, what if we made the M1A / the M-14 into a CQB weapon? Well, that's what we have, the SOCOM 16 right here. An M14 with a 16.25-inch barrel. This thing is compact. But do you sacrifice too much? Is it uncontrollable? Does it just suck? Or is it good? Many things to learn about today as we talk about the Springfield SOCOM Sweet 16.25. Before we can get into that, though, we have to give a shout out to our biggest sponsor. They keep this content free for you guys. That is, of course, Primary Arms. You know, you might be wondering to yourself, how do I show my love to Primary Arms? That's a great question. You know, I think the best way to show love is to be about it, not talk about it. Go over, email them, say, Garand told me to send you hugs and just virtual love, because there's not enough of it in the world. Isn't that right, Sawyer?
Oh, that's so true.
Point is, HTX1, awesome pistol optic, 1-8 compact. We love their optics. Give them a lot of love. Guys, if you are looking to be more American, we, of course, can't recommend Henry Repeating Arms enough. Here's the thing, guys. Shot a lot of guns, and here's what I've realized as I've gotten a little bit older and kind of shot everything, which is I love heritage. Henry rifles are made in the USA or not made at all, and that is real. So you got to give it to a U.S. manufactured rifle right here that stands to the heritage of America. Go ahead and give them a lot of love. And, you know, henrythumb.com. We can't talk about it here, but give them some love. Guys, if you want to get better at shooting, we recommend Dry Fire Mantis to turn your weapon into a dry fire machine, and we absolutely love it. And, of course, all ammunition is provided for by AAC. We are firing 168 grain Sierra Match King primarily, and that ammo rocks. That is enough of that. Let's go ahead. Let's get into the full review of the SOCOM 16. Guys, we're not going to beat around the bush here. Our SOCOM 16 from Springfield Armory had quite a few issues. So we did have Fulton Armory do a full once-over on this gun to get it a little bit more acceptable. We'll be talking about that in the autistic black screen breakdown, because right now it's all about shooting and see how the gun is from a shooter's perspective. So the first thing we're going to do is, this is supposed to be a CQB gun. I don't know. Sawyer, how concussive was it?
Dude, that thing is gnarly to be in front of.
So anybody who has run one of these indoors with a CQB team has kind of realized the same thing, which is 308 indoors. It is a lot. But today we're going to be starting off with a good old bill drill that is going to be 6 rounds at 7 yards as fast as we can. Right. 246. I'll take that with 308. Good, we got 2 out right there. Looks like my zero's a little to the right. Go ahead and crouch for that, and we'll try that one more time. Nice. Okay. Yeah, look clean. Just us to the right a little bit on that one. Really, the SOCOM 16 is a very controllable weapon. We also have an adjustable gas block in here, so we can mess with the gas, being that we do mount the suppressor sometimes. So we're gonna put you around the side here, take a little bit of look at recoil comparison. So as you can see, when you're shooting it, the recoil is really right back in your shoulder. We don't have a brake on here, we just have a normal 3-prong, or excuse me, a 4-prong on here. And you can see that it's very controllable as far as a 308 goes, especially for a 16-inch barrel. I would say even softer than a G3. However, I think overall the G3 is a better weapon. That being said, you can see how easy it is to control. They did do a good job on keeping it not excessive in the recoil department. Okay, let's try one more close guy, and then let's see how this rifle works, because being a 308, this is a battle rifle, so it can definitely stretch its legs. Let's see what it's capable of. Now, obviously, we got this guy in an EBR chassis. That's not going to change any of the functionality of the gun, besides making it slightly more accurate. But we did add a bolt release right here. This is from Fulton Armory. That's a Sadlac. So when you insert your mag, once you have your mag locked into place, all you have to do is just hit that bolt release, or you can ride the charging handle. But I enjoy just hitting that bolt release. Real nice. Let's do a Mozambique. Mozambique is known as a failure to stop drill. So you put two in somebody's chest, for some reason they're not dying. Probably not going to happen with a 308. But you don't know, because we don't know what they're built like. They might be built what?
Different.
They might be built different. All right, two to the chest, one to the head. Very dead. That rhymes. Let's go ahead. Let's walk this out to about 550. Let's see how it does as a battle rifle.
How'd a muppet like him make it through selection?
Man, I got some hard autism, don't I? So, we got our targets right there at 550 and 570. We're gonna be taking some shots. Obviously, this is a battle rifle firing a 308. 308 is more than capable, even out of a 16-inch barrel, to make it out to about 800 from our time on the HK 417. That being said, this isn't the most accurate rifle, and we've had some issues with it accuracy-wise. So let's see what we can do, what we can make it do, and we'll see if we can make those shots.
Hit. Just right. Low target value. Hit.
You know what? So if I'm doing my part, it actually is not too bad, which is surprising. Being like a 2 to 3 MOA gun on a good day, I'm happy I can make those further shots. I shot it out to about 700, and it was definitely problematic. I know I'm using a red dot too. You know, this isn't the best setup for what it is, but being set up like a battle rifle, it still works. We'll go ahead and we'll keep taking some shots here.
Hit. Hit.
Okay, it's doable. It's tough with the red dot. I think with or I know with a magnified optic it was do well. But the point here was to show you how to behave as a battle rifle with the red dot. And you know what? If you know what you're doing, and if you're doing the right things, you can definitely get those impacts. Not the easiest, but very doable. All right, we'll take some shots standing. The gun's hot, but see how she's doing.
Hit.
Well, that is a lot of fun. Okay, done a lot of shooting on the SOCOM. Let's do a little bit of talking. Let's go full autism and see what we get. You know, people ask us, Garand and crew, what do you like to drive? Well, if you're not driving a Kawasaki, f*** you. So we've done a lot of shooting. Let's do a lot of talking now. The SOCOM 16 is a very interesting rifle for a lot of ways. Before we kind of launch into it, let's talk about a few things. So first off, this is a semi-automatic magazine fed, typically from a 20-round magazine like we have right here. Fires a 308/762 by 51, a very legendary weapon. Now the SOCOM 16 is new. Obviously the M-14 and the M1A have been around for a long time, the M1A being made by Springfield Armory. Now their builds and what they've done has changed a lot over time, and we'll talk a little bit about the history. Although when it comes to the history of the SOCOM 16, it was made in around 2004 or so. The thing I want to talk about is first off going to be full disclosure. What is my relationship with Springfield Armory? We've obviously received guns from them to review, whether it be the Springfield Kuna, the Echelon,
A 1911 as well that we haven't gotten to, which is amazing, by the way. I always like to make sure that we tell you guys exactly what's going on. There's no exchange of ammunition or money or anything like that. We simply get the rifle in order to review it. You know, we try to be as unbiased as possible, and that is the way that we do our reviews. Now, the EBR chassis was bought specifically by me, so understand that was not paid for by Springfield Armory. And in fact, this chassis ended up costing more than the gun itself. More on that later. When you have any type of firearm, whether it be an M1A, M16, AKM, etc., there are the original specs that these guns are made to. So for example, we talk about the M16, we talk about a 20-inch barrel. That is what the parts are made to handle. That is the recoil they're made to handle. It just so happens to be, in the case of the M16, that it did pretty well as they shortened it down. They had to make a lot of improvements. With like the G3, you have a 17.7-inch barreled 308, and it really doesn't do that well when you start shortening it. Shortening guns is always a give and take. You can shorten guns a little bit, but the more you shorten a weapon, the harsher and the quicker both the bolt, the recoil mechanism is going to operate, and thus leads to more and more wear. We look at one of the shortest AR-15s, like a Mark 18, there are shorter. But like a Mark 18, it typically burns itself out in about 5 to 6K rounds before you need to replace the entire BCG. And that's just because everything's moving so fast. And you compare that to like a 15 to 20, even 30K on a normal AR-15. So when we're talking about an M1A, a 308 battle rifle that has been shortened from 22 inches all the way down to 16.25, you run into some problems. In today's review, we'll be talking about all of those problems and talking about what it's good for. But essentially what happened was Springfield was making the M1A, and they thought, this is a great rifle. What if we shorten this and we use Colonel Jeff Cooper's stance on a scout rifle? We had an ability to mount an optic forward, keep that balance nice and light, just like people were really kind of getting into around the 80s and 90s. M1A Scout was born, has an 18.5-inch barrel, and was quite well loved. As the GWOT kicked off and as CQB got more intense, people kept going to shorter and shorter weapon systems. In order to kind of reinvent themselves a little bit, Springfield came out with the SOCOM 16, which is the quote-unquote CQB variant, the close quarters battle variant of the M1A. This is the shortest model they make. There are other companies that make an equivalent or that make it even shorter, but you just have to understand from Springfield, this is as short as it gets. It is an M1A. It is an M14 in every way, and that's good and that's bad. So let's roll into this. Now, this particular gun did have a lot of issues, so it ended up going to Fulton Armory so that they could kind of redo it a little bit, because the review wasn't going to happen without them. Fulton does kind of specialize in refurbing and kind of making your Springfield Armory M14s, M1As better, as a quick note. So let's go ahead, let's start off tip to butt, just like my Navy guys love. Maybe my Marines, we don't know, but we'll get into it. So first off, suppressor. We do have an RD suppressor right here. Big fans of the suppressor. They're heavy duty. They're not the best in terms of weight, etc., but they are extremely durable, and that's something that I love. Compared to the M1A, we do have some things that have severely differed compared to the typical SOCOM 16. So most notably, instead of having just the ported muzzle brake, we added a threaded front sight post gas block adapter that allows us to add any type of muzzle device that is 5/8 by 24. This allows us to mount 8-taptic suppressors, etc., and that's what we wanted, because we wanted to be able to really explore this weapon, what it was capable of. When some buddies had used the SOCOM 16 in various types of CQB, the problem that they've always run into is that 16.25 inches of barrel and a 308 leaving that's a lot of unburnt powder. You have quite the muzzle flash, and this has been problematic for many departments, as well as the fact that when you're shooting indoors, this thing is ridiculously concussive with its standard muzzle brake on there, which sorry, will post up right now. That's why we added the 4-prong. It doesn't help quite as much as you think it would, which is why in certain situations you might need a suppressor. If you're adding a suppressor to an M1A, you of course need to be able to adjust the gas. The long op rod on the M14 M1A has always been a bit of a weak point. As you're really putting a lot of pressure on there, you run the risk of damaging the gas system, everything, op rod, etc., if you're not controlling the speed of that bolt. Not to mention you're going to really wear down your rifle quite fast. So we do have one of the Fulton Armory adjustable gas plugs on here. There are many companies that make them, Schuster, etc., but this is what we're using. It's been running wonderfully. We can gas it to whatever we need, which has made this rifle last probably a whole lot longer. At this point, we got 4K rounds on this, which is a lot for a 16.25 inch barrel. Moving over to the barrel itself, the M1A from Springfield Armory is not the most accurate rifle in the world. Before everyone gets mad, this is not saying that the M14 is an inaccurate rifle, merely that the M1A has some tolerance issues and some just issues overall, build quality wise, that lead to a less impressive grouping. Now they do make, you know, their specialized rifles like their White Feather and stuff that are M25s essentially and do much better. This typical M1A is definitely lacking when it comes to accuracy. And when it comes to the SOCOM 16, this thing is really lacking in accuracy. At best, this is a 2.5 MOA gun, I would say, at best. We have occasionally gotten to MOA groupings with it, but even when sending it to various M14 experts, about the best they were consistently getting was about 2.7, with like the best hand-loaded ammunition. With standard gold medal match, typically 2.5 to 3, and that's messy with it. Different stocks, different chassis systems, different barrels. We even threw in like a Criterion barrel and a USGI bolt. Just nothing was getting this thing more accurate. There's just issues there. When you're going down from that long M14 or you're coming to something that you want to use for CQB, the sacrifice is definitely that you're not really getting to really use the 308 to its full potential. And the reason for that is the accuracy just isn't that good. Now we compare this to something like an HK 417, like the M110A1. That does have a 16-inch barrel, however, it was designed from the ground up to utilize that, and that gun is phenomenally accurate at well under sub MOA. Just understand what you're getting into when you do a SOCOM 16. I'm not saying it's a bad gun, but merely you have to understand that its use case is changing just because it can't be used in certain applications due to the way it was built. Fulton Armory did unitize the gas system in order to increase accuracy. They did all the little tips and tricks, but we still were just not getting good accuracy with this. So if the thing that you're really looking for is going to be a super accurate gun that can shoot super far, well, continue on. The SOCOM 16 isn't for you. Please don't click away though. We have a lot more to talk about. Moving from there, we do have to kind of touch upon the Sage EBR chassis right here. The reason we put this on was vibes. I've always loved the look of the EBRs in the white. This is very much so early Global War on Terror vibes. Prior to them being coated and being black, like we see right here, they were this nice silver color, most notably used by Air Force Special Warfare, used by many other individuals in Battlefield, in Call of Duty, and it is the classic look, which is why we had it. EBR stocks do contribute to accuracy. There are different ways to do it, but they are good in terms of being a heat sink. All that aluminum allows that heat to bleed off and dissipate very well, which keeps the gun more accurate overall. Kind of moving back from there, we're going to go into the action and some of the things that we did to squeeze everything that we could out of this gun. So when we're coming back to the receiver itself, the first note that we need to make is that this Springfield Armory receiver is in the 500,000 range. It just so happens that the 500,000 range on most receivers is a very problematic bunch. And I definitely saw that with this particular gun. Anything from the cam tracks on the side of the receiver to the way the bolt is interfacing leads to a lot of undue wear that is prematurely wearing out the rifle faster than it should be in a typical scenario. And that's not just from it being small, that's actually due to the receiver itself just not being quite to spec. So this is something that Fulton Armory worked on for me to refurb it, make sure it was working and everything. And I know I'm throwing a lot of shade at Springfield. I'm sorry. It's just when it comes to an M14, guys, unfortunately, if you're really wanting to get a good build, you do have to spend the money on it because most of the USGI parts, the surplus government parts, have dried up at this point. So you're dealing with companies that are now remaking receivers and stuff, and in some cases, they're just not quite up to par. You just have to understand we had a lot of problems there that had to kind of be cleaned up because this was like a 5 MOA gun when I first got it, which was unacceptable. Once we got that cleaned up, another thing that we did was that we added a scope mount. Obviously, you do have the Sage cantilevered mount. It's not the best. We went with a Sadlac airborne mount. This gets into the strip clip guide, is a very, very sturdy mount. Of course, once it's mounted, you still can see the iron sights. There's that little dip in the mount right there. Being that I have a PEC 15 because I'm way too tactical, means that I can't use it. But if the PEC 15 weren't there, the iron sights are very usable. And one thing that I should say about Springfield is they did put a very excellent front sight on here, and it utilizes the ever excellent M14 standard rear diopter sight, which I'm always been a huge fan of. Coming down to our typical controls that we have right here, One thing that we've added is bolt release. So when you fire your last round, typically on your M14, what's going to happen is bolt's going to lock back, you get your mag in, but in order to run it, you're either going to reach under with the firing hand, release that charging handle, reach under, hit that in order to release it. By adding a bolt release, once we have that mag in, you simply mag in and then you hit that bolt release and you drop your bolt. Now, obviously, because we have the follower that's going to lock it back, with an empty mag, it's not going to properly drop, which is why I didn't have it in that little demonstration. But if we're talking upgrades to your M1A M14 and you're using it as a battle rifle, as a CQB weapon, I definitely would recommend that little upgrade. As far as magazines are concerned, these magazines have been made for a long time. Typical ones that you see out there are Checkmate Industries. It really depends on your manufacturer and which ones are really, really good. But generally, I've had good luck. USGI surplus that aren't Checkmate are also easily had. The nice thing about the M14 is although it wasn't a service rifle for a long time, it served for a long time. And because of that, there are a whole large abundance of M14 mags that are absolutely available. Moving back, we do have an enhanced magazine release from Sadlac as well. Love this guy. Just makes it just a little bit easier to release those mags right there. So big fan of that there. Obviously, the safety on the M14 is your typical safety. It's simply in the trigger guard. That is safe. That is fire. When you're in there ready to shoot, you're just going to have your finger in that trigger guard, ready to fire. You know, is it dangerous? Well, are you dangerous? Moving back from there, let's go ahead. Let's do what we always do. We're gonna talk about triggers. So I actually didn't have Fulton do any work on the trigger because the SOCOM trigger from Springfield is quite good. So we have about 2 millimeters of play, hit our wall. That's nice. That's nice. It's like 4 pounds. Feels great. All right, let's feel it off the reset. Off the reset, short take up. This gun can be fired fast, so long as you can control the recoil. Moving back from there, we of course have our grip on the Sage. That is great. I really love the grip angle on this thing, and we have the stock. Adjustable to whatever you might need, many different positions. I usually keep it almost all the way in, 'cause it's already kind of a long gun. Helps you kind of really control a little bit better. That kind of brings us to the end of kind of going over this. The thing I'll say about the SOCOM 16 is it's really fun to shoot. You have to understand that about 300 in, I absolutely trust this gun, and you can make further shots. We obviously shot it out to about 570. But kind of the inherent accuracy problems definitely begin to rear their ugly little heads out past 300, and it makes me a little bit uncomfortable firing it past there just due to some of the inherent accuracy. I also typically had weird flyers, and every other guy who shot this had the same thing. And this isn't just this SOCOM 16. This is fairly common from what I've seen. Just the flyers are really annoying. You'll print like 3 and then you'll get 2 just off to the side. So printing a small group should in theory be possible. It's just those random little moments when the bolt isn't perfectly locked up, when the barrel hasn't settled perfectly, whatever harmonic resonance has gone through as the slugs travel down the barrel, has just led to things settling in such a way that one of those rounds is going to fly every about 5 rounds, which really sucks for grouping because, you know, my autism wants those nice little groups. I don't get them with this guy. But it is quite good for what it is. Obviously, the thing I would recommend going into a SOCOM 16, understand what it's good for, what it isn't. Check the serial range. If it's in the range that there could be some concern based off of online forums or other problems, I would send into Fulton many other M14 builders out there as well that you could go with that could correct any of those issues. It's just, you know, I've worked with Fulton a lot, so they're the first to come to mind. So that would be my recommendation. Now, if you do take all those, you know, kind of things I've told you and you decide you're going to run a SOCOM 16 anyhow, first off, based, that's freaking awesome because there's just something about somebody running a battle rifle really hard that's just amazing. The really interesting thing about the SOCOM 16 from a shooter's perspective is that even going from a 22-inch barreled M14, the recoil really isn't all that different. That's obviously due to the adjustable gas block to some extent, but even when gassed properly, you know, what it should be, you're not really getting that much more kick. That's a combination of weight, of course. With the EBR chassis, it's like 11 plus pounds. But even in its original chassis, which is at about 8.8, it really is a very controllable weapon. So you really do have to give it to both the designers of the original M14 as well as Springfield for making a generally serviceable product. It's just what it comes down to in the end, guys, which is when we're going to kind of more odd weapon systems like we see with the M1A, you're just going to pay more. So you have like a SOCOM 16 between 15 to 2 grand, and you're getting kind of a, I'd say, mediocre weapon overall. Now you compare that to spending 2K on like an AR-15, you're getting like a Geisy Super Duty with optic and mags and everything, and life's good. And you're getting a phenomenal weapon that, funny enough, can probably shoot further than this guy simply due to the inherent accuracy. So it's all about choosing your poison, picking what you want. What I'll say is, if this is your first rifle, I wouldn't recommend it. If you really got to have one, 100%. But I think there are many better M14 builds out there. If you're going to go with Springfield, I would definitely go with an 18.5. When I asked different M14 builders about it, I was talking like this 90-year-old guy. I'm like, what's the best upgrade for the SOCOM 16? He was like, an 18.5-inch barrel. And funny enough, about everybody agreed with that. Take that for what it's worth and kind of make your decision from there. If this thing is right for you, the only person who's going to know that is going to be you. So make your choice, make your research. I'm merely a piece in the full puzzle of spending your hard-earned meat bucks. So we have this set up as a run and gun type rifle. So out here up front, we have one of the older Surefires. Big fan of it. Also kind of meets the qualification of vibing with the whole build. It's what would have been on it. On the top, we have a black PEC, obviously to keep the nice color scheme going. On the side, I've taken the pressure pad, I've simply wrapped it with hockey tape and secured the pressure pad right here. From there, we have the typical hand guard that's right here. That's about where you grip. And you can see with that pressure pad right there that my thumb is right behind it. That's how I kind of naturally grip the M14. And then when I need to use it, I just rock my thumb forward right there. Going back to the optic, there are many different optics you can run on an M14. For a battle rifle, I'm a big fan of a red dot. Now, obviously, because this is, you know, Battlefield vibes and Call of Duty vibes, I had to put one of the older Trijicon Reflex 1x24s on here, and this thing has been absolutely phenomenal. I know the downsides to this optic, but man, do I love it. Stock on the Sage EBR is wonderful. It's obviously adjustable to whatever height you need, which makes for very easy shooting. So overall, guys, that kind of brings us to the end on the SOCOM 16. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I know this was a bit of a kind of bummer if you're a big fan of the SOCOM 16, and you have to understand that as much as I boohooed this gun and been like, hey, there are many problems and issues there that you need to think about, I still like it. I still think it's a fun gun. It's just not a gun I'm going to trust my life to or depend upon in, you know, a very terrible environment. That's something where I'm going to go to like an LRB, a Fulton, a Smith Enterprises built M14 or a Bula. So just understand what you're getting into, and that's what you got. Springfield M1A, SOCOM 16, great gun, vibey gun, cool, and it's going to turn heads at the range. Just know what you're getting into. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. That is the final thing that we got for you guys today, and hope you guys have a good day. And, you know, final thing would be a little bit of dad advice. A little bit of dad advice for you guys today is going to be, make sure you're watching that cardio. You know what? Muscles can be big, but if the heart's not athletically large, but is large due to, you know, use of drugs and alcohol, well, you're gonna die early. So make sure you get your cardio in. Stairmaster is, you know, the gentleman's choice. Get out there, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the Patreon. Nothing else for you.